Well, hello everyone. It's that time again. It's David, and I am here to comment on Season 1, Episode 5 of Babylon 5, the original series. Not the new series, because I'm not that well connected to Warner Brothers. This one is titled Parliament of Dreams. Now, it starts off with Garibaldi and another member of security checking people, through immigration, for lack of a better word, before they're allowed on Babylon 5. Now, we find out that this is day 2 of a week-long dominant religious belief exchange. Now, what that means is, I guess, Earth Central decided it would be great for everybody that Babylon 5 hold an entire week where each of the alien species, can demonstrate their dominant religious belief system. Now, he's arguing with another member, or kibitzing with another member, because a Drazi religious guy is bringing in a dagger that is pretty healthy sized dagger, part of his ceremonial dagger. Well, Garibaldi makes, and it's another mem that comes out, basically says, he's arguing with this novitiate, or this religious guy, and the religious guy says, "You're testing my patience." And Garibaldi quips back to him, "You're testing," or excuse me, he says, "You're testing my faith." And Garibaldi looks at him and says, "Well, you're testing my patience. Now move along before I decide to flunk out." So that's another one you'll want to be paying attention to for the memes that are floating around out there. It switches back and forth, as Babylon 5 does quite frequently, with another little mini arc, or mini story inside of these mini arcs. A messenger arrives and delivers... I keep jumping up even ahead of myself. I just got to learn to relax and kind of breathe in front of the camera. But Katherine Sakai comes on board. Now, why she's important is, it turns out she was Jeffrey Sinclair's on-again, off-again girlfriend. Now, Michael Garibaldi sees her, instantly recognizes her, and according to Bro Code 101, rings up his boss, his buddy, Jeffrey Sinclair, and says, "Hey, your ex is here." So, Miss Katherine Sakai comes in, books a berth, and it kind of ends up settling in. Does not find out, though, that Commander Sinclair is the head of Babylon 5 until she actually gets there. So she says, which I kind of find that hard to believe, because I would suspect that any new, process or press announcements and all of that stuff hailing this Babylon 5, that they would not mention anywhere, "Oh, by the way, the first commander of this station that's opening it up is Commander Jeffrey Sinclair." But anyway, she feigns ignorance, that she knew nothing about him being the commander of the station. Switching back to another little visionette, you see Ambassador Jakar in his quarters, and he has some sort of roasted animal head that he's singing a song to his dinner, basically, and he's getting up, puts his dinner down, is about to take the first bite, and all of a sudden a beep comes in. He screams at the door, "Come in." And this guy introduces himself as Tupari and says he has a very important message only for Ambassador Jakar. Well, Ambassador Jakar is like, "Look, dude, I'm about to eat dinner. Leave it here and I'll tend to it when I get done with my dinner." the guy ends up getting hurried out, and Jakar goes down and is about ready to eat his dinner when his curiosity gets the better of him. You know, why did this guy come all the way from Narn just to hand me a little crystal with some sort of secure message on it? Well, he gets this message, and the first thing that jumps up is another Narn. Oh, shock, surprise. It comes from Narn. It has a Narn in it. Evidently, what we find out is this guy was a competitor with Jakar for something having to do with Kalri, which is the Narn inner power circle. And Jakar was a member of this Kalri, and he was in competition with this guy for some sort of status or symbol. Jakar obviously won. This guy was sent off, but he manages to scrape up enough funds so that by the time Ambassador Jakar gets the message, this guy will be dead due to whatever, but as he has all of his assets liquidated, he puts it into an account for somebody and hires somebody to kill Jakar within 48 hours. Well, of course, he doesn't say who the guy is going to kill Jakar or what this person is. It's just somebody close to Jakar has been hired to kill him. And that's what we know. All of a sudden, beep, 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 comes Ambassador Jakar's new aide. Well, his other aide, Kodath, who's only in, I think, for 2 episodes, comes in, and one of the first things you'll notice, and the mems will pick up on this, is that Natas, his new aide, has red eyes like all the other Narns. His previous aide, Kodath, does not have, she has brown eyes. And I guess I've heard various, and what I can track this down to, and the reasoning is, the actress who played Kodath just quite simply would not wear red contacts in her eyes. Bill Mumy, who plays Lanier, and he'll be introduced very shortly in this same episode, says that he comes in and he's getting ready to do makeup, and the makeup at this point was a 4-hour process. He said towards the end of the series, they shave it down to 90 minutes. But he says he heard this one lady going up, running around, screaming, "I can't do it, I can't do it." And evidently, it was this actress, and she just could not put a red contact in it, just couldn't tolerate it. And so they wrote in that some Narns don't have red eyes, and some Narns have red eyes, just like humans. Some, like me, I have blue eyes, and some have brown, some have green, and some have a number of shades in between. So you'll finally see, oh, okay, Narn red eyes, as we are accustomed to seeing. It's at this point that Sinclair gets warned about Katherine from Michael Garibaldi, and Sinclair, trying to press Garibaldi for more information, says, "Was she with anybody?" And Garibaldi says, "Well, not that I could tell." And okay, do you want to know what her birthing number is? No, we broke up. And they don't go into what happens to Carolyn, but a little bit later. We find out that Carolyn wanted Sinclair to go into business with her and take off in her little flyer and go off across the sunset. And Sinclair didn't want to do that, so they end up splitting sheets and breaking up. Now, zipping on back in time, the first religious ceremony that they do, and this one is memmed quite heavily, there's a couple of them that I'll go over, but it's the Centauri religious ceremony, and Centauri seem to be pagans. We find out later that they have 50 gods, but that doesn't come into play much later in the story arc. But in this one, Everybody is feasting and walking around. We find out later that they walk around barefoot because it's very insulting in Centauri culture to be wearing shoes or coverings on your feet. But we see that the Centauri are all having fun and partying it up. Michael Garibaldi is a recovering alcoholic that we find out, so he's just drinking water. Delenn and the Membari, we also will find out Membari are completely incapable of tolerating alcohol. That even tiny little bits of alcohol will send them into violent suicidal rages. So Delenn is just sitting there, and she's kind of, because they're very used to these somber ceremonies, whereas the Centauri are just living it up and having a party. Now, one of the things that they do or talk about is, well, what started this party? Well, evidently on Centauri Prime, many thousands and thousands of years ago, there were two sentient species growing up side by side, the Centauri and a group they called the Zon. And Ambassador Malari, in a very drunken stupor, says, "Do you know what the last Zon said before dying?" And everybody's like, "No, what?" And he goes, "Ah!" like that. And of course, all the other Centauri, being drunk and getting in on the joke, laugh, and everybody else who's not in on the joke just kind of politely smiles and gives it a little chuckle. One of the things that kind of gets to people and kind of, whoa, I'm awake, is Ambassador Malari proffers a toast, and they all scream, the Centauri all scream Val 2 at the same time. So you might see a meme with Londo Malari or Peter Jurassic holding up a thing, and that's what he's screaming out, at least in the episode series. He then proceeds in a drunken stupor to crawl across the table as people are trying to pull their drinks and everything out of the way, and he's naming each of the gods that statues are there, kissing and throwing themselves in. And at one point, he makes the statement, "But in purple I'm stunning," and right as he says that, he passes out. And Veer says, he has become one with his inner self. And everybody looks at Veer and says, dude, he's passed out drunk. And Veer's like, yeah, that too. So evidently becoming one with yourself in Centauri culture means becoming completely intoxicated to the point where you pass out. And we will discover a little bit later on that the Centauri believe that, you're on duty to the Republic at all times, you're on duty to your houses, and another duty that you have is the duty to relax and party it up, and that this duty has to be taken with all serious reverence or seriousness as the other duties. The duties to your Republic, the duties to your house, to your family name, etc., etc. So, Michael Sinclair, ducking out of the scenario, figures out where his ex, Katherine Sakai, and they kind of bump into each other. That's when we learn about him and Carolyn splitting about a year earlier. And, she's like, look, I'll leave, and he's like, hey, you know what, since you're here, and even though we have a history together, it's the past is the past. You're here to do business. I'm very proud of this station. Let me show you around. And she kind of says, well, okay. She's like, oh, I would give you my birth number, but I suspect you already know what it is. And they kind of end on a kind of a note. Switch back to Ambassador Jakar's room, or office / room, and we find out from the new Natoth, the new aid Natoth, that there is an assassins guild because Jakar. Don't know why I'm having such a problem. I should probably drink some more coffee. But anyway, Jakar says, well, who would want to kill me? And she goes, well, I don't know who necessarily, but, or not necessarily who, but how. And who exactly are they going to get to do this? She goes, well, you know, they would probably hire the best, which is the Assassins Guild. And we discover from this that there is an Assassins Guild based on Narn. And that some reason it's perfectly acceptable in their culture to have assassins walking around. Because otherwise, why would there be an Assassins Guild if it, you know, they didn't have the business for it? Well, we also learn that this Assassins Guild, before they go in and hit their mark, that they'll leave what's called a death blossom, or a black-colored rose. Well, Jakar has not had a black-colored rose on it, so, or pop up anywhere, so he figures he's safe. Well, later that very same evening, as he's asleep in bed, he rolls over, wakes up, and lo and behold, there's a death blossom that has shown up conveniently after this new aid arrives from Homeworld. Well, Ambassador Jakar tries to arrange protection for himself and gets this big, nasty-looking alien. There's an insect creature whose name is Nagrath, who runs the Babylon5 underworld, at least at this particular point in time. So you see this little insect squeaking into a talker, and the talker's translating, and he gets this really big, nasty-looking alien to go sit with Jakar. Well, not too long later, they find this alien with a knife stuck in his back. After he is supposed to be protecting Jakar, and Jakar's wondering where he is, the Toth says, well, go check that room, and he's sitting there in the room, and Jakar is like, where the hell were you? And the guy basically crumples over with a knife in his back. So Garibaldi does a cursory examination, but because Jakar is a diplomat, he can only go so far into it. And we discover also that one of Ambassador Jakar's things is that he likes earth women, because Garibaldi finds a pair of women's panties that obviously no Narn would probably wear, but an earth female might wear. At this point, we zip on back to the arrival area, and a guy named Lanier arrives. Now, makes his first appearance. Now, this is from actor Bill Mumy, and he's a well-known actor, at least in the United States. If you're not familiar with his work, Google it. It is extremely extensive. He was a child actor, made quite a bit of money in the United States during that as a child actor. Unlike a lot of child actors, look up Gary Coleman from Different Strokes if you want more information on this. His parents were smart, and they took most of his money and put it into very safe and secure government-insured investments, so that when he was older, he didn't have to work. But he took this assignment mostly for something to do. The extra money, of course, was nice, but you'll see him at various points. He's written in and out as the story arc dictates, and Bill Mumy is quite okay with that. Yes, he has been in some episodes of Star Trek. In case you're wondering, that touches a little bit on the Babylon5 / Deep Space Nine argument. And I would very, very briefly, what that boils down to is J. Michael Straczynski, or JMS, briefly worked before Babylon 5 worked on Deep Space Nine. Somehow, and this, of course, story changes, depends on who's telling it, but somehow one of his copy of his Bibles for his Babylon 5 canon that he was working on got either left behind or stolen. And because if you watch Babylon 5, for those that want to do this and compare Babylon 5 to Deep Space Nine, there's a lot of similarities. Now, is it because it's a direct ripoff? Deep Space Nine is a direct ripoff of Babylon 5, or is it just coincidence? Because if you look at episodes of Babylon 5, there's been little tidbits here and there of many other shows. If you look at both Babylon 5 and Deep Space Nine, there are a lot of characters that go back and forth, including Majel Barrett, the wife of Gene Roddenberry, the originator of the Star Trek franchise. Sorry, you know what? I'm going to just take a quick coffee sip, just so hopefully I stop mumbling. And we zip around, and Ambassador Delenn meets herself, introduces herself, and asks for his help on doing the Membari religious ceremony. Now, during the Membari religious ceremony, one of the first things as they're zip into this ceremony, and they're all dressed in white robes, and they're all chanting, and then they share this red fruit that seems kind of weird at first, but whatever. And a lot of the ambassadors are there, and they all partake in, seems to be a very somber ceremony, but one of the lines from that ceremony, and this is probably one of the most memmed lines, and it's mostly attributed to Kosh, even though Ambassador Delenn first said it, and it's the phrase, "and so it begins." Now, this is probably the most memmed Babylon 5 saying that you're ever going to hear. And if you ever hear someone from Babylon 5, and they will almost always say, "and so it begins," and they'll try and say it in a Kosh type of a voice, and do whatever it is they want with their mem. But this, it actually gets its start from Delenn in this episode. We zip around to Katherine Sakai, and she's meeting with two business type people. And we find out that Katherine Sakai is a mineral surveyor. She goes around her ship, she finds unknown planets, planetoids, moons, whatever, and she surveys them for valuable minerals. Well, evidently her previous find had a sizable deposit of Quantium-40, which is extremely short supply in the Earth Alliance, and so it's extremely valuable. Well, she gets, I guess, a little cut of the pie, and the royalties, and they don't say what the number is, but they hand it to her, and obviously Katherine Sakai is like, "Whoa!" Like, "Wow, payday, I am rich." Well, she realizes she has nobody to share it with. And what happens is she goes, "I know. I used to be in a relationship with the commander. I'll just show up at his flat with a little bit of wine and some cheese and some bread," and they kind of go back and forth like, "Do you really think that's a good idea?" Even though, and what happens is they go through cycles in their relationship. They get together, they have mad, passionate love, then they fall out of love, and then they have a nasty breakup, And then a few years later, they'll meet up, and one of them has a boyfriend or a girlfriend, and the other times, if they don't have a boyfriend or girlfriend, they end up hooking back up together. And so it seems like kind of like the hamster wheel that keeps going around and around. And maybe some of you have had relationships. I've had one where I kind of, it was like 3 times it took me to get this person out of my life forever. It's like, oh my God, you're back again. Who let you in the front door? You did, when you called me up drunk and lonely and wanted to have a good time. Another thing that we learn is that Sinclair is a fan of Tennyson, because he was listening at first to Tennyson when Katherine comes in with her little bouquet of party guests that she got, and she starts all of a sudden reciting the latter parts of Tennyson, and he's like, how did you know that? And he's like, hey, Sinclair, we went to academy together, and I was your girlfriend, and I had to listen to this over and over and over again. Of course I've got it memorized. So a unique thing that we learn is that Sinclair is a Tennyson fan. At this point, we zip back to Jakar's headquarters. And Jakar, the Tupari, the Narn that delivered the death threat to Jakar, basically reveals himself as the as the assassin, and manages to somehow drag Jakar's body into a seldom used area of Babylon 5. Now, I'm not sure how he got it through the corridors without, unless it was in some sort of medical bay or something like that. And, somehow he gets Jakar into an unused portion of the station. And he reveals that when Jakar wakes up, he tries to go and charge after this guy. Well, all of a sudden, you notice this thing around his neck and around both arms. And all of a sudden, it just starts to jolt him and shake him around. And he gets knocked to the ground in pain. And he's like, oh, just to let you know, if you try that again, if you come within 10 feet of me, those things are going to electrocute you again, and if by some reason you manage to get within 5 feet of me, they'll kill you instantly. Well, Jakar, trying to plead for his life, is like, look, dude, whatever this guy paid you, I will double it. And he's like, look, I know you could probably make me very wealthy, but here's the thing. If I betray my commission to the Fentamakur, the Assassins Guild, they'll think that I sold out on principle, and then they will send someone out to kill me. Well, a little bit later, Natas comes upon the scene of Jakar missing from his quarters and deduces that Jakar is somewhere in the station. And she says once she figured out which Jeffrey's tube suddenly malfunctioned, that this is where Jakar was, and sure enough, he was there. Now, at first, the Tupari guy is pointing a gun at her, like, what the hell are you doing here? Turn around and go back. This is none of your business. And she is like, look, I'm the second. And he's like, second? And she's like, well, of course, you were never told, but there's always a second that goes along on these assassination forays. I'm here to succeed if you fail. And he's like, So in order to get these pain givers off of Jakar, she kicks him and hits him quite viciously. And in doing so, she ends up knocking off the pain givers. Well, as Tupari's turned around to face her, Jakar pops up, jumps up. Mind you, he's just been electrocuted and kicked and all that stuff, but he just jumps right on up and knocks this Tupari guy out cold. Well, a few seconds later, you wake up, and here he is in customs, and they basically say to him, "Look, pal, it's been 72 hours." And he's like, "What? The timing of your commission was only 48 hours, and it's been 72 hours, and you've not only failed your commission, but I took the opportunity to deposit a large sum of money in your account back home, so that it would look like anybody looking in from the outside would say he's failed his commission, and he's got a huge sum of money openly transferred from Babylon 5. This guy sold out on principles." And so because it was his commission alone, there in reality was not a second, but because this was your commission alone, the shame is yours alone. And they're not going to come after Jakar, but they're certainly going to come after you for violating the code of the Assassin's Guild. Because, evidently assassins have a code of conduct that prohibits them from selling out. So again, let me see here. Now, that all concludes, and another little kind of mem that you'll see is it comes, you see finally the Babylon 5 religious week coming to a conclusion with Sinclair demonstrating Earth's dominant belief system. Now, as any of you can imagine, there's no single dominant belief system on Earth. Well, maybe there is one 200 years from now. And what he does is you see a very, very long line of people as they're coming into this room, the ambassadors and stuff coming into this room, and he starts introducing them one. "Hello, this is Father so-and-so, he's a Roman Catholic. This is Mr. Habib, he is a Muslim. This is Mr. So-and-so, he's a Yupik Eskimo. This is Rabbi such and such, he's an Orthodox Jew." And the implication being that each person in this very, very long line represents an individual or dominant belief system, or at least together they make up the dominant belief system. There is no religious kind, there's just humankind. So that's pretty much all I have for notes and stuff on this this particular episode. Another heavily memmed episode for a lot of its religious connotations. And so I'm just wondering, out of everyone here, exactly what is your particular religious faith, if you don't mind me asking, and how do you choose to demonstrate that religious faith? Now, please try and keep it under, I don't know if there's an actual word limit on these comments, but I would be interested, in what people's religious faith is. Now, I myself am what's called ELCA, Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. We're old style, or I should say new-fashioned German Lutherans. And we tend to be a little bit left of center as far as a lot of the dogma and stuff like that goes. We do, of course, believe in Jesus of Nazareth. We do believe in a singular God. But it tends to be left of center in that we have no problems with gays becoming ministers or bishops. I think we also just consecrated our first transgender bishop. We have no problem with any of the, it's one of those attraction or increasing your membership by attraction rather than promotion. Whereas someone will say, he seems like a really happy-go-lucky guy. Well, thank you. Go ask him. Hey, it's because I attend this Lutheran church over here. Would you like to come with me sometime? As opposed to, I'm going to knock on your door and, hi, can I show you the good news of Martin Luther? Well, no, he died about 500 years ago, thank you very much. And if I really wanted to know his good news, I'd just look it up on Wikipedia. Thank you very much. So, that's just me. I'm not saying by any stretch of the imagination you have to be the same, but it would be kind of curious to see how many people watching this episode and belong to how many different faiths that are out there. Anyways, I think that about covers it for this episode, and I will see you soon as I'm on episode 6 next of my binge watching.